Hello again, my friends, and thank you for coming back to join me again for my little stories. I do hope the world has been treating you well, as it has sadly not been treating some of our brothers and sisters. But, things be as that may, shall we go forward? Today's story is something one of my friends asked to tell a story of some bears that lived in the wood. And you might think you know this story at first, but I think over time you'll realize it's not quite the same story as you've been told, and perhaps in the end, that might be better for it that you know the true tale now. Now, once upon a time, there were three bears. These three bears lived together in a house of their own in the wood. Because bears live in houses? I don't know. I don't live in a house. But anyway, moving on. One of them was a little small, wee, teeny, tiny little bear. And the one was a middle-sized bear. And the other one was a great, huge, gigantic bear. And they each had a pot for their porridge, a little pot for the little small wee bear, a middle pot for the middle bear, and a great pot for the great huge gigantic bear. You get the idea. They had their own little chairs, a little chair for the little bear, a middle chair for the middle bear, a big chair for the great big bear, and they each had their own bed, a little bed for the little bear, a middle bed for the middle bear, and so on. One day, after they'd made porridge for their breakfast and poured it into their porridge pots, they decided to take a walk into the wood while the porridge was cooling. Because everybody knows bears eat porridge and they don't at all eat people or anything else. So they didn't want to burn their mouths, so they took the walk, right? And while they were walking, a little old woman came to their house. Now, she was not a good, honest old woman, as we shall soon see. For first, she peeked in the window, and then she peeked in the keyhole, and sawing nobody was in the house, she picked the lock and snuck inside. But she found the lock didn't need to be picked because the bears were good bears and did nobody any harm and never suspected anybody would harm them. So the little old woman opened the door and went in, and well pleased was she that she saw porridge on the table. If she had been a good little old woman, she would have waited until the bears came home, and then perhaps they would have asked her to breakfast, for they were good bears. A little rough or so in the manners of bears, but for all that very good-natured and hospitable. But she was an impudent, bad old woman whose name might have been Karen or Susan or something like that, and set about helping herself. So first she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, and it was way too hot. She swore about that. Then she tasted the porridge of the middle bear, and that was too cold. So she swore about that too, and demanded to see a manager. When there was no manager, she went on to see taste the porridge of the little small wee bear. And that was right. That was just right. So she liked that, so she ate that all up. But then Karen, the naughty old woman, or Susan, or whatever her name was, uh, swore again because there wasn't enough porridge in the little bear's pot. So then she sat down in the chair of the great huge bear because she was tired. That was very hard and uncomfortable. She didn't like that. So she sat down in the chair of the middle bear, and that was way too soft, and she didn't like that. And so then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she cozied up into it, and she sat and wiggled and squished until the bottom of the chair came out, and she fell on the ground. And she swore even more and wanted to know what was going on and why life was so mean to her. So pulling herself out of the wreckage of the chair, and not caring about it, she went upstairs into the bedchamber in which the three bears slept. And she decided she was tired, so she lay down in the bed of the great huge bear, and that was too high at the head for her. And next she lay down in the bed of the middle bear, and that was too high at the feet for her. And then she lay down in the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor too high at the foot, but just right. So she decided she was going to take a nap, and she pulled the blankets up over her and fell asleep. Now, shortly thereafter, the three bears thought that their porridge should be cool enough, so they came back home to eat breakfast. Now the little old woman had left the spoon of the great bear standing up in his porridge. "Someone has been at my porridge," he declared, because that's how big bears talk. And when the middle bear looked at this, he also saw that the spoon was standing up in his porridge. They were wooden spoons. If they'd been silver ones, Karen, the naughty old woman, would have put them in her pocket. "Someone's been at my porridge," he said, in his middle voice. And the little small wee bear looked at this, and there was a spoon in the porridge pot, but the porridge was all gone. "And someone has been at my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the wee little small bear in his wee little small voice. Upon this, seeing someone had entered their house and eaten up all the little wee small bear's breakfast, began to look around. Now, the little old woman had not put the hard cushion straight when she got up out of the big chair, and so the big bear was like, "Someone's been sitting in my chair," in his great, huge, gruff voice. And she had squatted down on the soft cushion, the middle bear, and mashed it all up. "So someone's been sitting in my chair," said the middle bear in his middle voice. And you know what the little old woman had done to the third chair. "Someone's been sitting in my chair and has ground the bottom of it right out," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. And then the three bears thought it necessary that they should make further search. So they poked around the house, and then they went upstairs into the bedchamber. Now the little old woman had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear out of its place and thrown it on the floor. "Someone's been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great rough voice. And the little old woman had pulled the bolster out of the middle bear bed out of its place. That bolster's the thing that props your feet up. "Someone's been lying in my bed," said the middle bear in his middle voice. And the little small wee bear came to look at his bed, and there's the bolster in its place, and the pillow in its place on the bolster, and upon the pillow was the little old woman's ugly, dirty Susan hair, or Karen hair, which was not in its place, for she had no business being there. "Someone's been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the little small bear in his little small voice. And the little old woman had heard in her sleep the great gruff voice of the great huge bear, but she was so fast asleep that it was no more to her than the roaring of the wind or the rumbling of the thunder. And she'd heard the middle voice of the middle bear. It was only as though she'd heard someone speaking. But the little small voice of the little small bear was so sharp and so shrill that it awakened her at once, and up she sat. And when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out the other and ran to the window, crying for the manager. And now the window was open, because the bears, like good teddy bears they were, had always opened their bed-shelter window when they got up in the morning. Out that window the little old woman jumped, and whether she broke her neck in the fall, or she ran off into the woods and was lost, or she found her way out of the woods and was arrested by the constable and sent to the House of Correction for vagrancy and thievery, I cannot tell, because the three bears don't know. They never saw anything more of her ever again. And that's my story today. Story about entitlement and stealing, and bears live together. I suppose that's a rather good part of the story, in all earnesty, because, I know some bears, and they're quite excellent people, and you can only shudder to think what an entitled woman like a Karen or a Susan or a little old woman who steals things would encounter with them. But as usual, I do hope my story has entertained, and I hope that the universe continues to find you well. I'll see you next time.